Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Every week I talk to teachers who want to leave the classroom but don't know what to do next. Many of them still have a passion for teaching. So I'm delighted to have ex-teacher Kahila Sivas as a podcast sponsor. Kahila has created a unique private practice as an online math and learning success coach, which has given her the freedom to follow her passion to teach and to make an impact. Now Kahila runs a business where she trains other teachers who want to escape the classroom. This is for teachers of any subject and any level who want to build a business while they're still working so they can confidently transition out of the classroom. Her mission is to help teachers to escape the classroom, create the income they deserve, find their inner balance, and make a huge impact in the lives of their students. Kahila runs regular webinars to explain her method and training programs. Check out her website at www.mathcodes, that's mathcodes.com/webinar, or email Kahila at kahila@mathcodes.com to get more information and set yourself up for success. Episode 24. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm really pleased to be interviewing James Michael, who's an entrepreneur, a multiple business owner, and he likes connecting people, talent, with organisations. So welcome to the show, James.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Great to be here. So,
James, what's the name of your business or multiple businesses?
Well, these days it comes under the umbrella of the Justified Talent Group. So we've now got 4 different brands under that label, but the one that I'm probably most known for is Justified Talent.
Okay, and you've just started a new business, is that right?
Yeah, kind of. So we've had it running a little bit under the radar for the last 2 years as we've been doing a little bit of market testing and tweaking and all that kind of thing and investing in some technology. But yeah, as at this week, we've officially launched a new brand, which is called Bean Sorted.
I'm so excited about that. I love the name of it. When I saw that, I'm like, does that mean everything's been sorted? Is that what you mean by that?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, I've started developing a bit of a habit, and people are starting to roll their eyes at me when I do it now. And I actually say it with an East London accent. So it's been sorted, innit?
Yeah. I love that. I totally hear that when I read it. So yeah, perfect.
Great.
Okay. So James, when I work with teachers who want to get out of teaching, they often want to change careers completely because they're done in the classroom. They don't want to have to deal with all the many people that they have to deal with in education. Mm-hmm. And yet when I say to them, would you consider a sales job, which I know is the field that you're in, mm-hmm. The blood drains out of their face, like, no way.
Yep.
And I do often say, like, you're selling an idea every day in the classroom, like you're selling, concepts, but they've really got this, I guess, a skewed or warped view of what a salesperson is. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's interesting. I'm about 3/4 of the way through writing my first ever business book, which is going to be called The S Myth. And why small business owners must master the art and science of selling. And the opening lines in the book actually describes myself and my then business partner stepping into an elevator at 8:00 at night in downtown Sydney, and me turning to Glenn and saying, you know what? I don't want to do this sales stuff anymore. Seriously, get me the hell away from sales. Just let me do the product delivery. Let me do the operational stuff. You do all the selling, mate. I hate it. And the irony of that was that we'd just come away from doing a sales presentation late at night. It was probably our fourth or fifth presentation to that particular organization, who were making us dance around, all sorts of different burning hoops. But the real irony was that what we were selling was sales training. So Glenn and I co-owned a sales training business, and there am I telling Glenn I want to get out of sales, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that the issue for me back then, and it took me quite a while to come to terms with the idea that I am in sales, and I'm actually now these days very comfortable about being in sales. But it was to do with the fact that I just had this thing stuck in my mind that selling was about twisting and manipulating people towards a course of action that they may not really have been very, very comfortable with. And it was almost hoodwinkery and trickery. And, you'd be taught things called objection handling and trial closes and the hamburger close and the alternative close and all this kind of stuff. And so even just having all of that language, it made it sound as though, you were wrestling somebody in a judo dojo, and putting them into some kind of headlock, and then tapping out and saying, okay, I give in, I submit. So that was this idea that I had in my head around what sales was all about. What I've come to learn, and and I know where that comes from, that if you think about the archetypal salesperson, most of us imagine, this extroverted individual who's pushy, who's very, very self-interested, who can absolutely talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles. So, that's the kind of image that we have of the classic salesperson. And that may well have been appropriate in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 70s and the 80s. It started to taper off a little bit in the 1990s. And as we came into the 2000s, the way of selling and the way in which customers, whether that's in business to business or business to consumer, the way in which we want to buy today and are prepared to buy today has absolutely evolved. And so, what selling is really all about today in reality, and there's, I love the parallel of this for your audience. What selling is absolutely about today is educating potential customers, taking them on a journey of learning and discovery and insight, and having them genuinely learn. And I'm not saying this as it's not some special gift wrapping that we put around old-fashioned selling. Yeah. Today, making a sale to an individual or to an organization is very much a consultative conversation. It's a journey of joint discovery and understanding. And then, a good salesperson today will be sharing, a deep domain expertise and being able to kind of say, this is what we know about this particular problem that you're wanting to resolve. These are the things that we know, and these are the things that we've developed, or this is the way in which we approach this particular issue. And when that's done in a way that is sharing knowledge and sharing insights, that makes the sales conversation distinctly different, right? I love having conversations with my potential clients where I get to re-educate them about this thing called recruitment. There's a methodology that's been around since Adam was a boy, that is the typical path that recruiters go down and HR people go down, et cetera, et cetera. And so my clients, who are small business owners, expect me to go down that path as well, and I don't. Right, my approach to recruitment is distinctly different to the traditional methodology. And so as I educate them about why we don't do that, and in fact we do this because it gets a better result, you can see the light bulbs going off. And I'm not trying to twist them or manipulate them or sell to them. I'm genuinely educating them. And as a consequence of that, these days I'm much, much more comfortable with the idea of selling. Long-winded answer, but does that give some insight?
That's great. Actually, as you said that, you just took me back in time to about 1984 or 5. And I did social psychology. My undergrad degree was one of the subjects that we did. And I remember them then saying, what you should do when you're hiring people, this is way back in the 80s, is when you don't need new staff, do all the isometric testing on your top performers find out what their characteristics are like, and then use that information to choose your next batch of staff when you do need new staff coming in.
Yep.
And so that sounds kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, a research study that came out of Harvard a few years back now revealed that typical combination of reviewing a cover letter, reviewing a resume, conducting a structured interview, maybe even doing a personality test of some sort, and then reference checking. So they're the 5 things, the holy grail of recruitment, actually have a predictive reliability of just 0.26, where the ideal number is 1.
Yeah.
Right. So you literally are better off flipping a coin to make a decision as to hire this person or that person mathematically. Right.
Right. Wow. Yep.
Right. And so the greater the degree that we rely on data and irrefutable data, like data that has got high predictive reliability attached to it, the greater the likelihood that you're actually going to be able to recruit somebody who's not only got what it takes to be successful in the role, but they themselves are going to enjoy the job so much more because there's just this natural harmony between who they are and what the job requires of them, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So can you unpack a little bit more of the kind of, like, how do you test for that? How do you look for that? What's your process? You might as well tell us. We're all listening. Without giving away, the golden goose.
Oh, no. Listen. And so again, here's one of the new things in sales. The new thing in sales is you give away the golden goose. You share all of your knowledge and you share it willingly, because even as I do that, right, very few people will be able to pick it up and replicate it in the way that we do it. Right? They may get it logically, they may get it intellectually, but their capacity to then take that and run off with it and is negligible. And so again, this thing of where salespeople are often shifty and don't reveal too much, don't show your hand. All of that's gone now. So yeah, look, I'm more than happily share what our process is. I mean, I don't want to bore your audience too much because they may not be hiring people themselves. But
no, I know, but I think they're on the other side of it, where they are looking for a new job and they are going to be hired.
Yeah.
And so I think anything that we can add to their understanding of that process, and any tools that we can stock their arsenal with, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah.
So
sure.
Go nuts.
Okay. So bearing in mind, the caveat here is that what I'm always looking for and what we're always looking for is salespeople. We're looking for sales professionals. We're looking for people. And let me throw this out here for, again, your audience. Even though as a teacher, you may not have felt that you are a salesperson per se, and I get that, and I'm not going to try and twist that around. If depending on your natural hardwiring, it may well be that even though you've had a long and illustrious career in teaching, it may well be that your hardwiring lends itself to contemporary 2022 style selling, right? So what do we look for in a salesperson? One of the inherent things that we're looking for is how will this individual respond to increasing levels of stress? Because here's the truth, and this might make a number of people actually run a million miles away from the idea of sales. Sales is one of those roles where every day you get out of bed with an expectation that more people will say no to you than will say yes. Right? That's just the nature of sales. If I'm talking to a prospect and wanting them to engage us as a recruiter, am I the only recruiter they're likely to be talking to? Of course not. They're likely to be talking to 2 or 3 and possibly even 10 other recruitment agencies. And so, the probability of maths is that I may not get the gig.
Yeah.
And so, we need to be able to deal with that level of rejection on a daily basis. And so one of the things that we test for is what is your emotional response and what are your emotional strategies, your coping strategies that are hardwired into you when stress starts to come on. Right. And so as you're getting more and more rejection on a daily basis and you're having to face that's the reality that, 10 people are going to say no before one person says yes. How will you deal with that? Will you cope with that? Right. And so we have an instrument that so when our candidates come into our application platform, In addition to the usual sort of stuff that we get from them, like, your name and your address and where you've worked for the last 5 years and all those sorts of things. And we have a series of screening questions that we ask them to answer yes or no to. The final piece of that initial application is we get them to do a little 10-minute assessment, which then presents a report to us that gives us insights into how will they deal with stress. The next thing that we do, assuming that they've scored well in all of that initial part, is we then ask them to do a little a little video for us. Right. And so we asked them, and you and I were speaking before we went live on the camera. I'm not a big fan of cover letters per se. However, what we do prefer to use is what we call a cover video. And so instead of seeing a written presentation of you, I get to see you, Elizabeth, right? And I get to see you speaking, and so I meet the human being rather than a documented version of you. And so we encourage you to just tell us a bit of your story. 5 minutes in duration, and it's an opportunity for you to obviously talk a little bit about your career history, why you're interested in this role, perhaps what it is you think that you might bring to the role, et cetera, et cetera. The interesting thing about that is psychologically and behaviorally, that does have the potential to lend itself to a little bit of subjective bias and subconscious bias. And so, in fact, my team are actually trained to only watch the first 11 seconds of the video. Okay. Right. In that first 11 seconds, we're looking for 4 key things. In that video, do you demonstrate to me that you are intelligent, that you are articulate, that you are personally confident, and that you're comfortable with technology? Right. So intelligent, articulate, generally confident, and comfortable with technology. Because if you're not comfortable with technology, like this platform that we're on today, you're going to struggle in sales. Right. So assuming that's all a thumbs up.
And they're not like going into people's homes and doing a vacuum cleaner demonstration, are they, anymore? It's online now, usually.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm currently recruiting for a role which is selling wireless technology solutions for remote locations, right? So if it's a mine somewhere, in the west of the state, they're not going to get Telstra 4G out there or 5G out there. And so they need to have their own wireless communication facility. And the guy who's most likely to get the job currently lives in Mudgee.
Okay,
right?
That's like Western New South Wales.
Yeah. It's a small country town. And, he has had many, many years of success selling technology solutions online. Right. So, the world's changing. From there, what we then do is we get, if they get progressed to the next step, we actually get them to do a telephone interview. However, that telephone interview is conducted by an AI. Her name's Christine. And so the candidate gets sent a phone number. They can call that number 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so at a time of their choosing. Christine will always be there, obviously, because she's an AI. And she conducts an interview. And she interviews them on 3 particular aspects. And those aspects differ from one job to the next. So, there's not a set pattern of things that we're looking for, depending on what the nature and the demands of the role will be. But she interviews them. And she'll start off with a series of questions which every candidate gets asked, but then depending on how you respond and how you enunciate yourself, she'll then go off in different directions. So she's clever enough to understand that, okay, I need to dig deeper here, or I need to get a deeper understanding there, or okay, now we can get a head over in this direction.
Wow. So it's like she's got a flow chart, in the back end somewhere.
Yeah. Very much.
Then I have to ask that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then what happens is at the end of the interview, and as I say, they go for about 10 or 12 minutes, and she then scores your performance. And what she's doing is measuring the example that you've given, right? And so, she'll be asking questions like, Elizabeth, can you tell me about an occasion when? Right. Now, as you give that response and she digs a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, at the end of the interview, she then digs into 3 of the most powerful databases in the world. Right. So there's the Amazon Web Services database, or AWS, the Google database, and the IBM Watson database. And in those 3 databases is pretty much all of the knowledge that exists in the world on these particular topics that we're interviewing them on. And she then compares their responses to all of that data and then she plots them and scores them and compares that with the median in the general population.
Oh man, I'm getting goosebumps. This is almost creepy.
Almost.
Wow. So that's incredible. So
yeah,
this whole vast wealth of knowledge, how does she, we're calling her she,
Sure, her name's Christine. So,
we've already personified this artificial intelligence, but how does, what is she looking for?
Well, she's not looking for anything really. She's just, you'll give me an example. And I guess what she's looking for is there are going to be keywords that you will use in your verbal description, right?
Okay.
And she'll then look and she'll kind of say, this is a top end example of somebody, if somebody has high competence at this particular aspect, then this will be the language they're using. Mm-hmm. The language you've used is around here, right? And the description that you gave is kind of like this. It's lacking some of this, right? And so I'm going to score you here. You're around the median.
Okay, so she's like comparing the candidate to, say, someone who's given a TED talk on that topic. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Right. Okay. In a way. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. And now we don't necessarily need somebody who's given a TED talk, right? We don't need them to have that level of expertise. Mm-hmm. So, not only will the candidate be compared with, that vast amount of knowledge, but they'll also then be compared with the median in the population.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And the commitment that we make to our clients is we'll always present to you candidates who are slightly above median or better.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want to present people who are median or below.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
From there, we then move to the more in-depth, human-to-human interview that most of us are more familiar with, and that's where I meet with you. We have our own recruitment platform because it allows me to put little bookmarks into the video. Because if you're one of the people that's shortlisted, I'm actually going to send a copy of the interview to the client to watch and listen to. And when you say something really, really good that I want the client to take note of, I've bookmarked that in the video.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And we give a description of something you say, and so out of that, typically what we try and have is to have 10 people who we take to what we call the in-depth interview. And out of that 10, we'll present 3 to the client and kind of say, look, in our opinion, all of the data is telling us Elizabeth is absolutely good to be able to do the job, and she'll do it well, and she'll enjoy doing it. So now we want you to meet with them, Mr. and Mrs. Client, and you don't need to interview Elizabeth now. All you need to do really is have a conversation and see whether you all get on. Can you imagine spending 8, 10, 12 hours together in a confined space and not wanting to beat each other to death?
So you're looking at cultural fit there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Cultural values alignment and all that kind of thing. Generally what happens out of that, and in fact, and this fella, Steve Liddell.
Oh, yes, I do.
From Street Science, right? We've put 3 people in front of Steve just recently, and he's come back to me and he said, mate, I hate you. I need to hire all 3 of them.
Oh, no. Okay, that's fantastic.
Which is a nice problem to have, right? And he won't hire all 3 of them. But ultimately what will then happen is we then put the finalists through a very, very deep psychometric assessment that we have, which is one of the most predictively reliable psychometric assessments on the planet at the moment. And we compare their results with a benchmark that we've created for that role. And that helps us get a deep understanding of, how will Elizabeth actually conduct herself in this role? And if there are any deviations between her hardwired behavior and the expectations of the role, and we're measuring it across a raft of 18 different factors, right? And if there's misalignment on 1 or 2 of them, then your new manager needs to be made aware of that so that they can support you and coach you and help you kind of deal with that. If there's too much misalignment, that means we've got it wrong right from the very beginning. But what it will also mean is that your natural hardwiring doesn't really lend itself to the demands of the job. And so, after a point in time, you're probably going to become quite stressed and distressed in that role. And so, we would advise against.
So give me an example of what that might look like. Like, I'm just thinking, I find having to learn new like platforms like Outlook, say,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm used to using Gmail and whatever, then to have to use a different. Now, I used to use Outlook at school, but I haven't done that for, a decade. Not quite 6 years. And so going back to having to relearn something like that, I find that really stressful. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yeah, it could be that, or another example is maybe in the behavioural area. The role may require you to be a little bit more assertive than is your natural comfort zone. Right. And so if there's a gap of greater than 30% between where you sit normally and what the expectation of the role is, the ability to close that gap is almost impossible. Right. There's a phrase that I like to educate my clients on, and that is, it really doesn't matter how much training you give to a donkey, it's never going to win the Melbourne Cup. Right. There's only so much training that works.
In the nicest possible way.
Yeah. Right. So, it might be that the role requires you to be a little less accommodating than you normally are. You might be a very obliging and polite person who's very customer-centric, but in actual fact, success in this role requires you to be a little less of that. Right. And so again, if the gap between where you land naturally and what the demands of the role are is greater than 30%, that's going to cause stress and tension for you. Right. And ultimately, you'll end up not being successful in the role.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So there's so much there. So if I was someone who wanted who now that I've listened to this conversation, I'm thinking maybe I should consider sales. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing. And I don't want to go through that whole arduous write a resume and cover letter and all that, especially now that I've learned that actually that's all useless and it won't set me up for success in the role as much as it will also cheese off my employer, because they're going to hire, if they hire me and I'm not suited to the role, they're going to be annoyed at me at some point in the future. That's not going to be fun for anyone. Yep. So how do we get in front of you? How does a candidate find you?
All right. So, I mean, normally I'll give the normal response, and then I'm actually going to make an offer for you and your audience, right? So normally, quite obviously, it's a job ad, right? So when we've got roles that we're recruiting for, like the street science job, not so long ago, I was recruiting for Mathletics. Before that, I was hiring for 3P. Before that, we've been hiring for a business called Little Scribe, all of which required people with education backgrounds, right? To make a transition out of education and into sales, but being able to call upon that deep understanding of how education works, the understanding of pedagogy and curricula and the machinations of how do you get in front of the business manager and the principal and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So normally it's about, looking at a job ad. So, if anybody's interested and contemplating getting into sales or has, committed to the idea they want to get into sales, just go to justifiedtalent.com/opportunities. And, every job that we ever have up will always be, visible through the website. Right. And then you just click on apply and away you go.
And do you also put jobs up on Seek and Indeed and all those places as well?
Yeah, absolutely everywhere. Anywhere where job ads, are traditionally advertised. So, what our platform does, so we've got some very clever technology. So as soon as we write a job ad and we send it live on our platform, the platform promulgates that out to every job board known to mankind. It also puts it on Facebook. It puts it on LinkedIn. It'll put it on YouTube if we've got a video attached to the ad. It goes on Twitter, Instagram. Apparently at the moment, we're even looking at going on TikTok, which just does my head in.
There's a lot of people on TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
Hang on, before you go on. So does that mean because these are mostly remote roles, is that right?
No.
They're not all remote roles.
No. So here's the thing about recruitment, right? I'll tell you this, and then I want to segue to something else because I want to give your audience some encouragement. Recruitment ultimately is two things. When an organization uses a recruiter like us, there are two things that we need to be delivering to them, right? So number one is a marketing campaign that attracts the best available talent on the market at this point in time, right? And so, us going out on all of those platforms essentially is, we have an understanding that not everybody's going to seek.
Yes.
But lots of people are on TikTok and lots of people are on Facebook and lots of people are on Instagram. So wherever our audience hangs out, we need to make sure that our marketing campaign reaches them, because every time we fail to attract the best possible candidate, we've failed, right? And then the second part of recruitment is we need to be able to predict with a high level of accuracy on our client's behalf that Elizabeth is actually the right person for the job. Yeah?
Yeah.
If you'll allow me, I want to kind of share this before I lose it out of my memory bank.
Yeah, sure, go.
Right. I want to share with your audience that I got into recruitment 3.5 years ago. So I'm not a career recruiter. I'm not a professional recruiter. I've owned 8 different businesses over the last 20 years. I currently own 4. But I got into recruitment 3.5 years ago because I saw an opportunity, right? I saw that there was a gap, and in particular, because I'd owned the sales training business, I know a lot about salespeople and how they function and how they're hardwired and all that kind of thing. And I knew that most small business owners have a desire to grow their business, need to recruit a salesperson, but I also knew that they're nervous about doing that, right? And so I saw that as an opportunity to create a brand new business. Where am I going with this? I had never been a recruiter. None of my businesses had ever sold anything to the small business sector. And we 3.5 years ago started using technology that 3 years before that didn't even exist. Right. So this capacity, so as I've just said to you, when we press go on our job board, it throws it onto every job board and it goes to Twitter. And that technology didn't exist 6 years ago. Right. And so, I want to encourage your audience to be comfortable with the idea that you can step out into something that is absolutely and utterly foreign. Right. And have a go at doing that. I did that at age 55. Right. At age 55, I started a brand new business selling something I'd never done before to a marketplace I'd never done business with, using technology that didn't even exist 3 years ago. Right. And so I'm no Rhodes Scholar. Right. So, I really want to encourage many, many members of your audience to go explore, go have a look at, what are the different possibilities and different things that really appeal to you, that really kind of float your boat, that really get you excited about the possibility, and then don't let the fear get in your way. Right. Just have a go at it, because for me, I got to tell you, it's been an absolute hoot. Starting these new businesses up, and the getting to interact with small business owners on a daily basis, and to play a meaningful role with them in the growth of their businesses just tickles me pink every day. But 5 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be a recruiter.
Right. Okay. So this really is a new thing for you.
Yeah.
So, James, tell me, you've just alluded to the fact that you were in your mid-50s when you kind of pivoted, if you like.
Yep.
A lot of the audience that will be listening to this will be in a similar situation where they might have been in their career for 20 or 30 years. They possibly haven't had to apply for a new job in that time.
Yep.
And they're at the top of the pay scale too. So they don't really want to take a massive pay cut, but they might be willing to take a bit of one in order to reduce the stress in their life, which is, pretty demanding kind of job.
Yep.
Especially at the moment where there's a high there seems to be, what I'm noticing is a lot of bullying in the workplace, and also this kind of real micromanagement coming from admin,
right?
Because of the data-driven nature of education as it is at the moment.
Yep.
And the one way that the principal can assert authority is to, pick on a teacher for some small infringement, like they're drinking coffee in front of a student or whatever, and they're the knock-on effect is it makes their life miserable. They go home and think, why am I doing this crappy job? I want to get out. But then they're like, oh, but I'm on $100,000 a year. How am I going to replace that income? What would you say to that person? So who's, really starting almost from scratch again and is going to face being a novice in a new field as well?
You know what? I think the key thing here, Elizabeth, is for each of us to understand the transferability of our skills and experience, right? And so it may not, in fact, mean that you end up being a novice. There will be roles out there which, if you think about the things that you have done on a day-to-day basis, for instance, one of the things that I know about the teaching profession and the way in which teaching is done, and even, and as you start to get up to kind of head of a department or head of curriculum and all that kind of thing, it's very project-based. Yes. Right? And so you've actually got project management skills. One of the single most sought-after skills in enterprise today is project management. Right. If you can manage multiple resources and multiple people in different locations in order to then come together to, deliver an outcome of some sort, if you do that and you do that well, you will absolutely be sought after in the workplace, in the enterprise workspace. So, ultimately what I would say is, somebody said to me many, many, many years ago, the money's made in the plan. Right. The money is made in the plan. And so, if I kind of take a hold of that and transfer that a little bit, I would encourage your audience and your clients to spend as much time as possible, probably with you, getting a deep, deep, deep understanding of what do I actually have in my tool bag here that I take for granted. The important thing about that, though, is then you're going to need to translate what you call that into the world of enterprise, right? The moment you use the word classroom, that's what's going to be the response from anybody in enterprise.
James is yawning, by the way, for the listeners who couldn't see that on YouTube.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm yawning.
Yeah,
right. It's the moment there's language that you're used to, that you've been using day after day after day for the last 20 years. It's deeply ingrained in you. And so one of the things that becomes important is for you to go on a journey of learning where you learn the new lexicon, where you get an understanding of what's the language that's used outside of teaching. And, okay, so they call what I call this, they call that. Oh, okay, so use that language when you're making your application or when you're doing your interviews and things of that nature. I think as well, increasingly, employers today, and especially up in the six-figure salary end, employers today are looking for individuals who have a capacity to solve problems or to realize opportunities, right?
Okay.
That's, if I'm going to pay somebody a six-figure salary, like this is not a junior entry role we're talking about here. If I'm paying somebody six figures, then you need to be good at either solving problems or realizing opportunities. Okay. And so if you think about
like the teacher's skill set,
yeah,
that's what they do all day.
Yes.
They're looking at their students going, let's realize the opportunity of, making you grow and learn and fulfill your potential. And yeah, the whole day is like that. Wow. Can I just take you back one? You talked about project management, and because I think this is a real issue that teachers don't realize that actually that's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So if I run an excursion, this is my favorite example. I was partly in charge of the art budget, so I had to do the risk assessment for the excursion. I had to work out where we're going to go to the venue. I'd have to go to the venue and check it out and make sure everything was going to be okay. Check that there was no pornography on the walls outside the art gallery, for instance. That happened one day. It's like someone had graffitied a giant. Anyway, you get the idea. And so stuff like that. What are the cost of hiring a bus? Who do I need to tell? I need to send notes home to parents. I need to get the money back. I need to go to the business manager. We need to make a 10% profit, if you like, so that if a kid doesn't pay or they can't pay, they can still come. So all of these things you have to factor in. And this is just to take, a class of kids to the art gallery. if you can manage all those moving parts and bring everyone home alive, then you can manage any project, I reckon.
Correct. Absolutely. And so I would encourage, you all that are either watching or listening to this, go take a look at anything online that talks about project management, get an understanding of, what's the language that comprises the process and the methodology of project management, and then think about what you do on a regular basis that matches that. Right. And then it's a case then of learning to confidently articulate those competences.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. So I've given that example. Does that qualify as a project? It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the criteria for a project?
Well, ultimately, projects, and it's kind of not dissimilar to most things in that, a good project starts with the end in mind, right? So we need a desired outcome. And now we need to backwards plan and think about what are the staging points, what are the different pieces that we need to have put in place and made happen and achieved in order to then get to that ultimate destination. Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of other considerations. Who else, somewhere else needs to do something else in order to make sure that this has happened? Have I communicated with that person? Do they understand what my expectations of them are? Are they in fact fit to be able to perform that task for us? Can I rely on them, et cetera, et cetera? So it's the management of a whole host of moving parts and people in order to get a particular outcome. Right. And that may well be something as, and I'll use this term, simple as an excursion, right? Or it could be, right now, goodness me, HSCs are happening around the country in this, COVID environment. The organisation sitting behind all of that has been absolutely bloody enormous. And I think the enormity of it this year, I think it's enormous every year, but the enormity of it this year and probably last year, I think most people will get that it's been enormous, but I don't know that they'll necessarily understand that actually means you have got an incredibly powerful tool bag that you walk around with, and that there are companies out there who will pay for you to bring that tool bag along, right? Because you've got some of the best tools.
Yeah, so just for the international audience, the HSC is the Year 12 exam, so like final school exams, and so here in Australia, because we're still in lockdown in some parts of the country or partial lockdown, we've had to do online COVID safe. Some kids have had to do it remotely, and some kids are in person, and some kids are in isolation, but they're in person and they've got exam supervisors wearing full PPE so that they're, able to stay safe. And it has been a really complex operation, as I'm sure internationally everyone knows.
Yep.
But absolutely. Imagine if you were the brains behind all of that. That would be an amazing set of transferable skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think if you can kind of reflect on what it is that you have done in the last 12 months, along the lines of, say, project management, and if you can think of 3 examples through the last 12 months of where you've done those various things, where you've had to, to encapsulate it, where there have been multiple moving parts and people who you've had to marshal in order to come to an outcome, and that's happened over a period of time. If you can come up with 3 examples of that, you should feel extremely confident that you've actually got a competence called project management. When you then go to interview, or even in your cover letters, et cetera, on your LinkedIn profile, feel confident to make mention that you possess a competence called project management.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine that nearly every teacher, any teacher who's in any kind of leadership role or in any kind of specialist role, where they're maybe running an athletics carnival, or they're running the art show, or the school production, or anything like that, they're all projects.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. They are. And so let me pick on another word that you just used, and it's the word leadership. right? DPs, APs, principals, these days particularly, right? Yes, there's admin and there's data, but there's also people leadership. Right. And, there's somebody who I know who is currently has been for the last 6 months a stand-in principal at one of our local high schools. And when we chat on a regular basis, I am in nothing but admiration for her leadership skills, because she has completely overhauled the culture in that particular school. And it was the staff culture, not the kids' culture. Right. And so as we talk through, and she would kind of share what she'd done that day or what she was going to be doing tomorrow, I was just thinking, my God, this woman would be amazing in enterprise, right? She's got these leadership skills. So again, for those in the audience that are at that level, in their school and in their career, feel very, very comfortable about the fact that you've got leadership and management capability that is translatable into enterprise. Yes, you've been in public service. Yes, but you've been in an institution of some sort that's somewhat isolated from the rest of the world. I guarantee you've definitely still got transferable skills that are sought after, needed.
Awesome. Thank you, James. That's such a great insight. And before we wrap it up, I've got one further question for you.
Sure.
And I didn't give you pre-warning. I usually do, but I'm just going to run with this and hope you can cope. What's your favourite song?
My favourite song?
Yeah, and why?
Good grief.
Come on, that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's actually it's a Sting song. Oh no!
Tell me the lyrics.
I can't even remember the lyrics. I certainly am not going to hum the tune.
Okay.
And have it out there in the
all
ether.
Right. So, what is it about Sting that you like? That's all right.
Look, what I like about Sting is that. For me, he's the thinking man's performing artist. For me, he's deeply intellectual. He has, I think, fantastic values, I think he wants to stimulate people to think a little bit more than just enjoy the song. And then I just love the richness of his songs. It's generally accompanied with an orchestra, and there's a richness. There's every song is a tapestry. It's not just about the words and the jingly tune. There's richness and depth to it, and that's the appeal for me.
That's a great answer. Wow, thank you. You actually, as you said that, you took me to. I once took my son, who definitely brought down the average age of the audience when we went together to see a Beach Boys concert.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And it was sensational. It was just amazing. They were so energetic. I couldn't get over it because they were. I think they were in their 60s or 70s when we saw them, maybe even older. So tell me, have we missed anything in our conversation today? What should I have asked you that I didn't ask?
No, I don't think it's anything that you should have asked me, but I want to make an offer to you and to your audience, and I'll send you a link for this later on.
Okay.
If anybody in your audience is contemplating the potential of possibly getting into a sales role, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a portal where any one of them can come in and go through some of our processes. So we probably won't go to the AI interview stage, but in terms of understanding temperament and, their ability to deal with stress, all of the early indicators that tell us, yes, you've actually got what it takes to be successful in sales. Right. I'm going to make that available to your audience. They can come in. It'll take them about 10 minutes to complete it. And then we'll let them know whether, it looks as though sales could be something for them.
Wow, that is an incredibly generous offer. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you. All right. Well, everyone, wow, what a great way to end this episode of the Get Out of Teaching podcast. James Michael, thank you so much for being my guest on the show today.
My pleasure, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. What an amazingly generous offer to the teachers in my network. So if you are considering leaving teaching, you really do need to check out James's offer. It's a comprehensive, thought-provoking questionnaire, and I've done it myself now since we recorded. And it's tailored to the education sector, and you really will learn more about yourself just by doing it. That was the final episode of the Get Out of Teaching podcast for season 4 and the last one for 2021. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to say a big thank you to the team who helps me create this podcast and also run my business. Firstly, I would never have started the podcast without the training of the founder of Experts on Air podcast network, Brett Jarman. My first episodes were produced by Tim Chadwick until about halfway through lockdown last year when my daughter Eleni Diakos took over. She created an amazing process document so that I could then offer the role to Fleur Gowland from helpadmin.com.au. And Fleur has been doing an amazing job of following up on guests and dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, as well as helping manage the mail out of the Get Out of Teaching newsletter. A big, big thank you to Millicent Herrera Tanyala, who admits all of the applicants waiting to join the Get Out of Teaching Facebook group and keeps the database up to date. Thanks also to Rosanna Lim from Cool Pixels, who along with Tom Vines has been transcribing the episodes for the past couple of seasons. Tom has also taken George the Maremma for lots of walks. The music for the podcast intro and outro was composed as a special favour by the charming and talented Zoe Fox from Zoe Fox and the Rocket Clocks. It's a bit different to her usual style, but you should check out her music. And thank you too to the listeners who tune in every week and have helped me overcome the fear of pod fade as we just tipped over 10,000 downloads. Without you on the other side, all this work would be for nothing. I'll be taking a month off to rest, spend time with family, and work on my book, The Teacher's Escape Plan. We'll kick off season 5 in mid-January 2022 with a series on staying well in teaching while you plan your exit. I wish you all a safe, happy holiday season and a prosperous, fulfilling 2022. Merry Christmas.